She spoke to the national minimum wage. And you know, it is interesting that the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, the current Honourable Member for Christchurch South, spoke to hearing about the national minimum wage for the first time in Parliament. He signed a document in 2018. He signed a document in 2018.
I'm going to stop him.
Honourable Member for Christchurch South.
Does the Honourable Member have this document that he claims that he signed? Does he have it? They get up in here and tell me that I say things without a basis. The point of order is that he's misleading you. It's a document in the House. Show it to the Honourable Deputy Speaker. Show it to him. Y'all can't come in here and tell lies every week and with impunity.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I can't be misleading you because you also sent the document.
Oh,
And at page 31 of that document, there is a bullet point that speaks to, and I know you don't quote from screens, but it speaks to establishing a minimum wage of $8 per hour and extending that across all sectors of the economy, so that the secondary school students who the Honourable Member spoke to would have understood, even at that 15 or 16-year-old level, would have understood that when you say you extend it to all sectors of the economy, you are talking about a national minimum wage. The Honourable Member for Christchurch South signed that document in 2018 with that point in it, and so I am happy that we are able to demonstrate that there was a time when he understood what good governance was about, what good policy was about. We do know that people put their hands to the plow and turn back. And the Bible speaks to what happens in those cases. The Honourable Member has a certificate or diploma in theology. He understands those things very well, those who put their hands to the plow and turn back. I do not wish it for him, though. In spite of his noise, his fury, I believe that he can always turn back again. And even when Judas was about to do what he was about to do, you know, Jesus really wanted him not to go in that direction. But Mr. Speaker, in the past 7.5 years, and I noted that the Honourable Member, I keep saying Honourable because I have really to stay focused.
Your Honour,
based on,
Your Honour.
Honourable Member for Christchurch.
Is the Honourable Member allowed, even by way of disguise, to issue language that constitutes an insult? That's the point of order. Is it contained in the rules that the Honourable Member is allowed to use the language of insult?
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm not sure that honourable is an insulting word, but I'm not sure if the Honourable Member...
It is said with sarcasm, and I am not going to allow you in 2025, at the end of 2025, to insult me in here. I'm not going to allow it.
So, Mr. Deputy Speaker,
continue, sir.
Honourable Member, I'm not sure where the sarcasm is, but the Honourable Member indicated that the last 7 years were years of famine. That is what he said. He joined us in giving within months of coming into office. He joined us in giving to the public officers of this country a pay increase. Mr. Speaker, in those years of famine, the Honourable Member joined us as we established the position of Custom Officer 4 to improve the lot of a number of workers in the Customs and Excise Department. The Honourable Member joined us in those years of famine to do that. The Honourable Member joined us, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in those years of famine to reduce income tax rates on the workers of this country, to reduce the level of income tax in this country. The Honourable Member for Christchurch South joined us in that. He joined us as we criticized the Democratic Labour Party for either withholding or reducing the reverse tax credit. He joined us in suggesting that that was not the right thing to do, and he agreed with us, because he was with us, that we ought to restore it, and that we did for the workers of this country. And we went further, Mr. Deputy Speaker. He joined us as we set up and established the compensatory income credit. He was in love with those policies and proposals because the compensatory income credit put money back in the hands of persons at a certain level of earning. Money that they would have spent in taxes. Government indicated, and he was a part of that once government had the financial resources, it would give back to the people of this country. I am tempted to do what he does, but I'm not going to sink to that. So I'm not going to let anybody know whether or not he is in the chamber or whether or not he is leaving. But, okay. That's not sarcastic. I take it in good faith. The Honourable Member has to go to court. That's fine. The Honourable Member, Mr. Deputy Speaker, was also part of the administration that agreed with the negotiating team in the public service to give the lump sum payment in the first year and then 2 years of increases in salary. The Honourable Member was also he didn't just sign the manifesto that spoke to the national minimum wage. He agreed. He was part of the government that agreed not at $8 as said in the manifesto. We went further and established the national minimum wage at a rate of $8.50 per hour in this country. For the first time, he agreed with us that the Democratic Labour Party had the opportunity to do it and did not do it, and that this government had done the right thing at the right time by establishing a national minimum wage. $8.50 with a sectoral rate of $9.25. Now, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if one listened to the sound and the fury, one would get the impression that this government has something against persons who are responsible for our security. The Honourable Member spoke about the fact that persons were not treated well and two police forces. Well, those who are old enough to know will recall that it was the Democratic Labour Party, while in office, that created 2 police forces in this country, that demoralized the police force, where one police commissioner had persons on a list to be promoted, goes on leave, another is appointed to act, a different list, and then we end up in court for years over a situation where the Democratic Labour Party and the commission that they set up work to destabilize and demoralize the Royal Barbados Police Force, as it was called at the time. This Barbados Labour Party has established the position of the Special Constable, and the Prime Minister, the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, has been very clear that we are going through the process, because unlike the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, we are not doing things off the cuff. We are going through a regrading exercise. And out of that exercise, we expect that those who do work and do work at certain levels and face certain risks and have certain responsibilities will be appropriately graded, and out of that grading will be appropriately rewarded. This Barbados Labour Party government is also the government when we set up the national minimum wage, determined that security guards, because of their work, because of their hours, because of the risks they face, ought to have a rate of pay that was different from all other sectors in this country at the time. And so while we set the rate of pay at $8.50, for security guards, it was set at $9.25. This is a government that recognizes that those who work to secure us, to keep us safe, must be recognized and must be rewarded. This piece of legislation, Mr. Deputy Speaker, includes some reward for some of those officers who work hard day and night and day to ensure that we have a level of security in this country. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Barbadians were treated today to the rantings of one who appears so scared at the possibility of a pending election. And what we were treated to was an attempt to place on record what could be considered alternative proposals. Now, I would wish public officers, particularly those identified by the Honourable Member, to remember the Democratic Labour Party some years ago. They promised all kinds of things to teachers and to police officers. They promised duty-free vehicles. Nothing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, has come out of those empty promises. So when people stand in here and talk about telling lies, I define lying as saying things that you're going to do when you know you're not going to do them, and then when you're in a position to do them, you don't do them. I consider that to be lying. The Democratic Labour Party, in my humble opinion, lied to the people of this country. And the people of Barbados, including and maybe especially the public officers of this country, must remember that the Democratic Labour Party does not keep its promises to public officers in this country. Does not keep its promises to public officers in this country. This piece of legislation is an example of a government who not only respects the work of public officers in this country, the very good work of public officers in this country, but is prepared to come to this chamber, is prepared to bring a bill before this House, a bill that requires a constitutional majority, is prepared to come here and to enact legislation that will allow security of tenure for those who have been in positions, acting in positions for 3 years or more. Barbadians embrace the idea, the concept of security of tenure. And it is really disgraceful for any honourable member, including the honourable member for Christchurch South, to poo-poo the matter of security of tenure. I am not sure what is going on in his brain, but I am sure that Barbadians generally, Barbadians by and large, want to know that they have some security of tenure. We were treated to a treatise, but not a treatise, that's probably elevating it. We were treated to a stringing of words together. And I think that is maybe appropriate at this time. We are stringing Christmas lights together. And we have some nice lights, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in Spikestown. You ought to come down and come into Spikestown, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I know you normally use the Ronald Highway. You are a man with roots in St. Peter. I encourage you to come to Spikestown and to Farley Hill. But we were treated to a stringing of words together. And an example given of one person who went into the private sector and another person who went into the public sector, and that the public sector is a place where you enjoy security of tenure. Now, to come with that kind of example and then seek to poo-poo a piece of legislation that is intended to provide that security of tenure for persons who have been acting in positions for 3 years or more. This Barbados Labour Party will never poo-poo security of tenure. And so we are happy, and I'm happy to support this bill today that calls for, the bill actually says that those persons are deemed, well, once it is passed, will be deemed to be made permanent members of the public service of this country. That is the kind of government that I'm a part of. That is the kind of government that I'm happy to be a part of. That is the kind of government that this country has the opportunity to support. A government that is interested in people, a government that is interested in their peace of mind, a government that is interested in their security of tenure. We are saying, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that if you have been acting for 3 years, unless something is wrong with your supervisor, it means that you are needed in the job. And the existing legislation already recognizes that 3 years in a job, unless it is project related, so unless there is a specific project that you're working on that has a specific life, a start date, and an end date, then outside of situations like that, it means that you are needed in that position. And so if you are in that position for 3 years or more, and on the January 1st of 2026, you will be deemed to be appointed to the position. This Barbados Labour Party, Mr. Deputy Speaker, has also demonstrated its human-centered approach to development, to people, to work. Since we've come to office, we have ratified a number of international labor organization standards, international labor conventions. We have ratified 2 occupational safety and health international standards, Convention 155, Convention 187. One is the safety and health, one is promotion of. But you know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we were about to ratify these conventions, do you know what we recognize? We recognize that the Democratic Labour Party, even though these standards were agreed at the ILO some years ago, neglected to bring those standards to be laid in this honorable chamber. A government, a party, the Democratic Labour Party, and the Democratic Labour Party in government, not interested in bringing before this honorable chamber those important and significant international labor standards to be made public documents in this chamber as called for by the International Labour Organization Constitution. A government, a party that has repudiated all that Barrow stood for. He was the one who took us into the ILO in 1967 or 67. And the government, the party that he left, well, this party that exists now is probably not the one he left. But it has the same name. So I am bound to refer to it as the party that he left. Has no interest in international labor standards. I had to come here, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as part of this government and lay in this honorable chamber about 20 standards that the Democratic Labour Party refused to bring to this chamber. But we have ratified, not just laid in the chamber, because laid in the chamber is a requirement under the ILO Constitution. Ratification is a different matter. Ratification is when a government decides this is a standard that represents progress for my people. We ought to be living by this standard. We ought to be implementing this standard in legislation and in practice. This Barbados Labour Party government has ratified a number of international labor standards and have determined that we will live by these international standards. We have brought to this honorable chamber, not to the chamber, we have ratified Convention number 149. This is the Nursing Personnel Convention, and we have done it in close collaboration with the Barbados Nurses Association. We have had lots of input, we have had lots of encouragement, we have implemented this standard, and all that we've been doing as a government is to put into effect the provisions and the requirements of this international labor standard. We have also ratified Convention 189. The Honourable Member for St. George North was very involved in that convention, and I remember, long before he was a member of government, or a member of parliament, hearing and becoming aware of all the work that she and the Barbados Workers Union was doing with respect to domestic workers. And we have ratified that convention. We have also ratified the Convention Against Violence and Harassment, Convention number 190. This Barbados Labour Party, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is one that is committed to workers, committed to their protection, committed to providing them with the opportunity to be producers in this country, recognizing their humanity, recognizing that work is about dignity, recognizing the concept of decent work, and doing all in our power to make sure that that decent work is recognized. That is the reason why this bill is before this honorable chamber. This is testament to the nature of a Labour Party. A Labour Party established since 1938 that still holds fast to its roots, still holds fast to what has guided us over these more than 80 years. This Barbados Labour Party remains committed to the workers of this country, workers in the private sector, workers in the third sector, and from this bill, workers in the public sector. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we recognize that this bill is not and cannot be a panacea. And I heard the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South talking about fighting windmills. I thought that after his exposition, very eloquent exposition, he is a poet, he is a speaker. After his eloquent exposition, I thought we'd come to the end of fighting windmills. The Honourable Member for Christchurch South, finding nothing of substance to oppose in a bill, seems intent on resorting to fighting windmills, seeing windmills as people that ought to be fought. I do not know where the idea came from that this bill is seen as a panacea. It was not said, there was no intimation of that. The Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast was very clear to talk about all of the other processes that are taking place, that have taken place already, that will serve together to lift, to continue the process of lifting the public service, to continue the process of recognizing the worth, the value of our public officers who serve us so faithfully day after day after day after day. This bill is not a panacea. This government is not introducing this bill into this House as a panacea. But Mr. Speaker, if I use that language, when a person is feeling ill, that person will from time to time rub down. You may be a little too young to know about rubbing down with Vicks, but your relatives in Maynards, I know they know about rubbing down with Vicks. You will also drink a lot of fluids. And you might also take a Caffeinol. You may be too young to know about Caffeinol. You might take a Caffeinol or a Contact C for the cold, because you recognize that you gotta fight it using a number of different processes. And that is what this government does. This government recognizes, I wish that the Honourable Member for Christchurch South had stayed with the government. I also wish that while he was with us, that he used to attend Parliament. Because if he did, he would understand what good governance is all about. Good governance is about making determinations as to the various policy interventions that are needed to address any situation and progressively implementing those policy prescriptions so that the ultimate goal is realized through the various policy prescriptions, through the various activities, through the various systems that are put in place. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this bill is one that public officers appreciate. In spite of the sound and the fury, the public officers that I've interacted with over the past week or so, after they became aware of this bill, they are happy. Many of them are gone beyond happy. They are excited. I, like the government that I'm a part of, I recognize and the government recognizes that out of policy prescriptions, there could be challenges. The Honourable Prime Minister, Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, shared with us, as was the case in 2020, I think it was when we had another version of this process and this bill, there is built in a process of appeal, because whenever there's a situation where a line is drawn, that is to say, a date is set, there will be persons who believe this is not fair to me. This government, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is about fairness. And it is about fairness, especially when we are dealing with human beings. And so there is in this bill an understanding that those persons who may feel that they were not fairly treated will have recourse. And that recourse is laid out in this bill. There is the appeal to our head of state, our president, and public officers who believe that they could be treated better are encouraged to use that medium. Many did last time, and a significant portion of those who used that medium were able to be successful in their appeals. And I say to public officers who, after this process, may feel hard done by, there is the process for appeal. A law must set certain parameters, but there must always be the provision for persons to have access to justice. And this government is about giving workers in this country access to justice. And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm happy to be a part of a government that is human-centered in its approach. I'm happy to be a part of a government that recognizes the dignity of work. I'm happy to be a part of a government that recognizes the dignity not just of work, but the dignity and inherent humanity of workers. I'm happy to be a part of a government that is so determined to do good by the people that it is prepared to come to this honorable chamber and eventually to the other place to ensure that those workers in the public sector who have been acting for 3 years or more will be able to have their tenure regularized so that they can enjoy security of tenure, so that they can go about their lives, they can go about taking care of themselves, they can go about taking care of those who depend on them with a sense that their work, their labor has been validated and that this government is interested in their welfare. I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. George North.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And this afternoon, I also rise to support the bill, and in doing so, to place on record my appreciation for the significant and measurable improvements that we heard mentioned by the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast and the Honourable Member for St. Peter who just spoke. Measurable improvements that have been delivered to public servants in this country during the past 7 years. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I rise today not only to place on record my support for the bill, but to set the record straight. Because too often in this country, memory seems to lapse, and it does so conveniently. And when we talk about the conditions about public servants, we really must speak plainly, because we have noted the measurable improvements that have been listed during the last 7 years, but for 9 years preceding that time, preceding 2024, not April 1st, but 2024 in June, we saw public servants receiving absolutely nothing. Not a raise, not an increase in allowance. As a matter of fact, far from increasing allowances, I hope that we all can recall that public servants were among John Public who no longer had the non-taxable benefit of allowances when they filed for income tax. Nothing under the previous administration. Nothing to recognize their service, nothing to recognize their sacrifice. 10 years practically of drought, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And yet in just 7 years, this administration in government has delivered more improvements to public officers than was delivered for an entire decade. Now, if I were minded to be like the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, I will start to shout and say, let the country hear it! Let them hear it! Salary increases, delivered. Expanded POLTA eligibility, delivered. And minimum wages. They might want to rubbish it. Minimum wages increase. Now, I sat and I heard with interest that the Honourable Member for Christchurch West was being credited with being the birthplace or the birthing house of the minimum wage. I listened with interest, and as was recognized, the Honourable Member for Christchurch West sat there with a poker face, because the Honourable Member, unlike me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, properly recognizes that there are certain balls that you should not play. But what I recognized with interest and why I was smiling to myself is because the honorable leader for the opposition continues the trend that is the pattern that was established by the last government, the last party in government, a party that continued to ignore what workers and their families were asking for. So it comes as no surprise that because the honorable member for Christchurch West, and I do recall the occasion as well, spoke very positively about the need for people to have a minimum wage, that the leader of the opposition would disregard the fact that for decades, working people and their families had been calling for minimum wages. The union, and I can speak for certainly one in the labor movement, one that I have the distinction of leading, I know that that union meets with the political parties or those that it considers to be the major players in the political landscape of Barbados before elections and on occasion during periods between elections when we are called upon to give our input. And for decades and decades and decades, to inform manifestos, that organization in the labor movement that I lead had been asking, among other things, for minimum wage. And in fact, we have on record resolutions going to the cabinet secretary, to the Barbados Labour Party, to the Democratic Labour Party, calling for minimum wages. And it did not start with me, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It started with my immediate predecessor, who is still alive, and it started with his predecessor, who was a member of the opposition party. So I really make these statements because some, in trying to make political jabs, others would do so at the expense of what is truth, do so at the expense of what they know to be a circumstance that is important enough to working people and their family that they, through their representatives, had been advocating, not just for years, but for decades. But while others continue to talk, and while others continue to jab, this government seeks not to get it right every time, because simply, Mr. Speaker, there are limitations to trying to get it right. And that requires resources that we must continually work through different forms and fashions to be able to deliver to our people. But this government continues to cut through the level of discontent that is in the public service. And I didn't say the level of discontent that was in the public service. You would note very carefully, I said the level of discontent that is in the public service, because we must make it clear that while progress has been recognized during the last 7 years, progress does not mean perfection. There are still gaps, and we must not pretend that there are not gaps. The issue of contract workers is one that remains a vexing issue. The issue of workers not getting acting pay in a timely manner, not being paid those who are on temporary appointments, and not receiving other entitlements remains a vexing matter. As recently as last week, Tuesday, while I was sitting in this honorable chamber, I got a message coming in to me from a young lady who has been in temporary employment for the last year and 11 months, but who had not received payment since May this year, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And you know why she didn't receive payment when we investigated and unraveled it? Not that she didn't work, and not that nobody didn't know that she didn't work, but the ministry responsible, the parent ministry, did not send down her information to the Ministry of the Public Service so that they could respond to it in a timely manner. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, these are situations that are not acceptable, and there are situations in which the people who are responsible should be held accountable. Because it's okay for us when we sit cushy going into work and knowing that our salary is assured, and then we do so, we go into work knowing our salary is assured, but not doing the things that we need to do to make sure that other mouths can be fed in this country. So there are situations like that that breed discontent within the public service. On the subject of contract workers as well, this government, and I don't say so proudly, but it must be recognized, that this government continues to engage some people under contracts for service. I have a fundamental problem with it. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we can accept that when you were under an IMF program, initially you had to look at different ways to do things to still put bread in people's mouth, even if you could not offer the long-term security as full-time employment would have offered. But I think, for instance, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of the 360 workers, now the 720 workers, still after over 5 years, there are under contracts for service. Not good enough, because we all drive around this country and we can see that there is a need for those workers. We can see that there's also a need perhaps for augmentation of the workers doing that particular job. And even if not augmentation, or reorganization of how those workers in NCC and the others over in MTW should work together so that this country, the objective of keeping this country clean, does not only remain an objective, but it is actually one that we can say is achieved, because we are falling short in that area. But why it remains a vexing issue for those workers and for people who represent workers is because it denies them a lot of things. It denies them the opportunity for security, the opportunity to go at Christmas time and secure a loan that can come out, the payments can be deducted from their salary, because they are under no clear contract where the financial institutions know that they're going to be able to get their money in a timely manner, weekly or bi-weekly or monthly or anything. And it is also a vexing issue because we have spent time, at least in the last 3 to 4 years, talking about the sustainability of the national insurance system. How is it that we want to make a system sustainable so it continues to be the lifeline for workers, and those workers are not assured that lifeline? Now we may argue, oh, but we paying them and they can go down to NIS and they can make their payments into the system so that they have the guarantee and they have that lifeline. But what we have been wrestling with for the better part of the last 2 to 3 years is having NIS, triple S, having that social security system recognize that these workers are actually on the contracts for service. NIS still does not treat to them that way, because NIS knows that when they look to the employment rights legislation and so on, there are certain conditions that must be satisfied if a contract is not to be determined as a contract for service, and that in every instance they do not meet the criteria. So they're denied it, and then the country suffers from having more people feed into the social security system to make sure, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, that when you reach the right age of retirement, there is something for you, there is something for me to draw from. And these are things that are breeding discontent in the public service that we must continue to address. So yes, nobody says that progress makes perfection, but progress means simply that there are steps being taken to do the right thing. And on that note, the one on contract workers in the public service, that's one that must be addressed. and address shortly. There's another sensitive matter that has workers shaken up, especially those who work in high security environments. We heard recently about the introduction of TVT testing and ID testing. And Mr. Speaker, the BWU has always supported, and I personally have always supported any endeavor that seeks to improve national security in this country. We have always defended to worker security, and that is why this was not introduced willy-nilly. It took over 2 years for the discussions around the proper introduction, because they had started some pumpawan down in the port. But the proper introduction of TVT testing, it took over 2 years for those discussions to reach a point that you say you roll it out. You roll it out not knowing that it is perfect still, but roll it out to see where the kinks are and where it can be improved. So to protect the dignity of workers, therefore, Mr. Speaker, we spent some time, for instance, ensuring that there was an appeals mechanism that was solid enough to stand the test of time if during the course of doing the TVT or ID test, there were issues that arose that needed addressing. So the rollout has begun, and we in the labor movement remain right there, not running, not hiding, not pretending to have some looking glass into the future on gaps that will emerge, but given the assurance that where gaps emerge, that we will be there to close them, because we intend to make the system work for all and to achieve the level of national security that every Bajan would be proud of and would want us to work towards. Mr. Speaker, it is for that reason, that same commitment to bring in balance to situations, to bring in fairness to situations, and working with sober leadership, that we did not attempt to block the recent bill on economic diversification. This has been a charged debate, a charged national conversation over the last few days. But democracy, sir, is not a museum piece. It is a living thing. And I believe that debate is healthy, whether it is on this bill, a previous bill, or whatever bills come to this chamber. Debate is healthy. And we must not feel offended when people start to question things and when people start to challenge things. Because when people question and when people challenge, all it tells us in the first place is that we were not clear enough. And even if we thought we were, that we need to go back at it to make sure that even if people don't agree, they can at least appreciate the effort that is being taken. So yes, I have been approached, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to weigh in on that. And I don't intend to step beyond the walls of the current bill that is being debated to get into that heavily, except to recognize that clarification was attempted. And Mr. Speaker, as I said before, we are not spiritual workers or ritual specialists that will stand from this point, especially in areas that might fall outside of our immediate scope of expertise, and say that X is going to happen or Y is going to happen, but we stand here waiting to examine the facts, follow the debate, and assess the implications for working people and their family. And it is on that basis that what matters now as it relates to the public service, what matters now as it relates to issues around economic diversification and so on, these require disciplined implementation, clear metrics, clear time frames, and public accountability. So the bill, where it contemplated job creation and labor market impact, which will not only impact private sector workers, but public sector workers too, these things must be measurable, Because either jobs are created or jobs are not created. Either quality is improving or quality is not improving. So just in passing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would want to say that the same framework that was in place under the IMF program, where there was a birth monitoring committee in place, that the advisory council that we were discussing in the last session of this parliament must not be a ceremonial body, but it must measure, it must report, and it must function like the birth committee, as I said, with periodic public updates coming to this country, coming to Barbadians, so that we can see what is working, what is not, and what needs to be adjusted. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have every confidence that this government that has shown that when things are not as it had committed or are not as it had planned, that it would course correct, and I believe that it will be done in this instance as well. But back to the bill in question in full, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we need a functioning performance management system. We cannot continue to return to this parliament every 3 or 4 years or so to create another appointments framework. And for the avoidance of doubt, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am not suggesting that people should be appointed regardless of performance. But what I am suggesting and advocating for, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that we have to work towards a methodology that recognizes or seeks to implement a system that recognizes tenure, respects seniority, and treats workers fairly, so that we don't have to be coming back with a bill every year, so we can do this on promotion, and we can recognize acting this way, and so on. We also need stronger health and safety protections across the public service. And even as we anticipate the conclusion of the job evaluation exercise, because that's the only reason that public servants have not been settled in terms of a salary increase for the period that should be effective April 1st this year. So even as we anticipate the conclusion of the job evaluation exercise, which is the precursor to the finalization of agreements towards those increases that we anticipate will come as well, Mr. Speaker, I'm recognizing that we all must recognize, not just me, that outside of the money, the health and safety of public servants is one where we continue to find too many efficiency gaps, and one that must be closed quite soon. Mr. Speaker, there is more to be done. There must be more that this government commits to doing. And we must not just commit to doing more, but we must show actively that we are working towards doing more and bringing more meaningful, positive change, not only to the public service, but to their families, which would also encompass people in the private sector as well. But, Mr. Speaker, I could not stand here or sit in this honorable chamber today and recognize that notwithstanding that there are problems, that significant progress hasn't been made. I would not sit silent, therefore, Mr. Speaker, so that I be confused with any of those who, Honourable Member for St. Peter, are being disingenuous enough as to pretend that nothing has changed when positive change continues to be evident. Let no one try to rewrite history by shouting hard and by presenting half-truths and so on, because positive change and progress has been made, and none of us can erase that is the fact. This government has sown seeds of improvement into the lives of working people and their family. I was also intrigued before I close, because I'm about to close, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I see you watching your clock. And I was also intrigued when the Honourable Member for the Opposition mentioned, as it relates to police and nurses, the noises that the opposition has been making that has caused the government to respond. I'm not interested in defending whether that is so or not. But what I was more intrigued about is the fact that even if he thinks that's the case, the government responded. And the government didn't wait until after 9 years of no salary increases, no allowances, parliamentarians getting beefed up, while the rest didn't get anything at all. And it did not wait for about 30,000 people to march the streets of Barbados, all on one occasion. I don't mean 600 times. I mean 30,000 people on one day, from north to south, west to east, joining hands and joining hearts in opposing a government that would not listen, and even where it was making clear mistakes, would not seek to course correct. I'm happy to be a part of a government that does not follow that. And I'm therefore happy, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that as a member of this Parliament and as a member of the labor movement, to know that I can continue to work to ensure that our best effort is not only something that is vocalized, but our best effort is materialized in the hearts and the homes of working people and their families. So, Mr. Speaker, without any further input, I support this bill. I'm obliged.
Thank you. Honourable member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that this honourable chamber be now suspended for lunch until 3 p.m.
The motion is this House be suspended for lunch until 3 p.m. All those in favor, please say aye. All against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. This House is now suspended until 3 p.m.